So now I'd like to introduce our next speaker, who's come to us all the way from Israel, Dr. Bareket Schiff Keren. Lessons from Israel. Dr. Schiff Keren works in the Tel Aviv Medical Center as a pain specialist and anesthesiologist. Her aim over almost 4 decades has been to help patients to recover and regain their well-being. After introduction to the medicinal attributes of cannabis by patients, she has found medicinal cannabis to be the sole effective therapeutic agent for a number of them. She looks forward to sharing her observations and thoughts regarding her Israeli medicinal cannabis experience. So please welcome Dr. Bareket Schiff Keren.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for inviting me to speak here, especially thanks to Lucy. And I'm very privileged and honored to speak here to this audience, and it's nice to see that the audience is getting more and more intimate. So I'll go on with my talk. Okay. As said before, I'm a pain specialist, and I was working in Israel for long years. And being an Israeli, I happened to know Professor Meshulam, the one who described the molecule of the THC, and thereafter he became the grandfather of cannabis, and everybody's referring to him, speaking about cannabis. And I happened to know him in 2004 when I was the head of the pain unit in Hadassah and Keren, and later on in 2010 when he had his 80th birthday, I could see how many people are dealing with cannabis and cannabis research, and how much interest is in this field. I got across cannabis not in my medical education, of course, because I'm in this generation in which nobody really treated patients with cannabis. I got across the cannabis through my patients. My patients came to me and told me, this is the thing which helps me. I treat pain, and I'm going to tell you something about pain, though most of you are familiar with what pain is. I'll just tell you a little bit. But before, I'll just tell you that in 2010, I got the idea of how much the endocannabinoid system is important, and how each and every cell in our body is dependent on that system. And the intake of cannabis is working on all the systems of our body. So first, I'll refer to the definition of the IASP, the International Association for the Study of Pain, because pain doctors, they know, but the others sometimes don't even have the idea of what is the definition of pain. Pain is as an unpleasant sensory and emotional experience associated with actual or potential tissue damage. That means it's an experience. One cannot measure it. Can one measure love? Can one measure hatred? That this is something that we can. The only way to evaluate it is to have empathy with the one who suffers. For instance, today in the morning, Lucy's husband, Lou, told me she has this terrible migraine, and I cannot understand how much it is. Well, we cannot understand unless we try to be have the empathy and to stand in the one who suffers steps, and to find ourselves in his place. But it's very, very, very difficult. So many times doctors somehow judge the patients in order instead of giving them the space and understanding them. So pain, the notion of treating pain has to be a lot of empathy and understanding, and this is the standpoint from which I come. Now, there's another definition that I have to emphasize, which is what is health? The WHO, the World Health Organization, has a definition for health. It is a state of complete, let's put aside the complete, physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. Actually, we know to treat or to heal very little. Most of the things that we can do is to alleviate the pain, to make the patients feel more enabled to go on with their daily life and have lives which are fulfillment, and one should feel happy in his life and not miserable and withhold in his little cubicle. That's what we're supposed to do as doctors. We cannot cure almost anything, and we have to be to understand this standpoint. And from this standpoint, it's much easier to think of medication that we might not be very aware of all the things that it makes, but we know that gives some relief to those who suffer. Now, the pain patients, what modalities do we have to treat pains? There are invasive modalities, giving them injections, going through operations. The previous speaker spoke about a very extensive back surgery, and we all try to do some good for the patients, but all the invasive modalities, they help for a while. None of them help for a long time, and they have a lot of drawbacks and a lot of they cause a lot of other damages. So sometimes it's even better not even to try them. We have physical therapy, of course. We have psychotherapy. We have medications, non-steroidals, and we all know the drawbacks of non-steroidals. They cause damage to the stomach. They cause damage to the kidneys. They cause raising blood pressure. They have a lot of other things that for short-term pain, it's okay, but for long-standing pain and chronic pain is something that one has to live for most of the times for lifetime. Pain is something that one lives with. It's not a good medication. Opioids, we have heard from the previous Dr. Sexton, what are the drawbacks of opioids. Going up to the hypersensitivity that it causes, opioid-induced hypersensitivity, and all the other things like being dependent on all the other things. And of course, opioids, even if they work for the pain, they do a lot of other things. Sexual dysfunction, all kinds of alimentary tract problems. They all give constipation. There's always constipation-induced opioids. The opioids cause it. Nausea, vomiting, lack of appetite, and all the metabolic problems coming from this. The antidepressants that we give very, very often for chronic pain, they have all the drawbacks. And antiepileptics, as we know, they are all causing a lot of other side effects. So there came the patients, and they told me, with cannabis, we can live. With cannabis, we can go on with our daily routine, and we can accomplish what we need in life. We can lead on a family life, and we can work, we can study. So I became acquainted with cannabis through the patients. Therefore, whenever people say, when on cannabis meetings, on cannabis courses, whenever they say thank you to this, thank you to Professor Meshulam, thank you to this, actually we have to thank the patients who were the ones who guided us towards this medicine. This medicine was left in the early 20s and put aside, and we, the doctors, let's say the new generation, I'm not that new generation, but the generation after the Second World War had to learn about this medication from the patient's experience. Okay, the brief history, you all know about the history. It started with the old Chinese, went through Babylon, Japanese, and you can see the pictures of the tinctures and all kinds of medicines that were all composed with cannabis somehow until the beginning the beginning of the Second World War. Actually, all the medications consisted of a little bit of cannabis. It was for everything. And I have to just mention Queen Victoria, who used cannabis for her dysmenorrhea, a very famous patient using cannabis. And I know that in Australia, this name rings a bell. So a little bit about the cannabis, the history of cannabis in Israel. Somebody yesterday in the get-together asked me about when was Israel named Israel. As a matter of fact, the state of Israel was named Israel only 69 years ago. Before, it was a British mandate, and before then, it was part of the Ottoman Empire. The Ottomans were, during the Ottoman time, it was okay to use hashish, which was actually cannabis in its raw presentation. The British, they forbade using cannabis and hashish because they thought it causes the soldiers to be less effective. And we actually inherited the law from the British, so most of our laws are British. In the early 90s, there started to be compassionate use of cannabis, which was given by a special license, which was, the license was for growing, holding and consuming through one could actually grow itself, but so there were some people who were recruited for as a compassionate dispensaries. The first one was actually Tikkun Olam, about whom Daddy Meiri have spoken already. Actually, Daddy Meiri threw me the ball, and I'm going to bring it back to you because in a way he was speaking about the very modern history of cannabis, the nowadays situation in Israel. I come from beforehand to see the situation, and after the first licenses were given, it was taken by governmental involvement, and there came a computerized system, supervision of a good agricultural practice, packing, distribution, and of cannabis products, and all this came under better supervision, not very good supervision, but a better supervision. Now, the medical cannabis actually, as I told you, started in Israel in 1919, and it started with anecdotal cases of asthma and intractable pains. The license was special license given by the general manager of the Ministry of Health and its legal counsel. Early on, in the early 2000s, there was nominated a special manager for cannabis licenses. And licenses were given especially as compassionate care, especially to cancer patients and to HIV patients, as a whole, terminally ill patients. And there was all the time the debate whether cannabis is going to be a medicine or whether one has to legalize cannabis. And the debate is going on and on and on till nowadays, like everywhere around the globe, I suppose. If you ask me, as a doctor, I was the second one in something which was named the Cannabis Party in Israel last elections, because I think legalization, like it is in Colorado, gives the space for patients who are not recognized by the medical establishment as patients to get cannabis without having the special, let's say, label of being ill, but having the possibility to use it for their well-being. As I said before, well-being is the word that I aim for when I'm treating my patients. Okay, now the Israeli Medical Cannabis Agency was established originally in 2011, and it has updated its forms. So the latest forms are from 2016. And I will speak about this agency now. This agency is leaning on several committees that they kind of arranged for themselves. One is the steering committee, apparently the one who's leading, who's giving the tone, and the people whom they choose for this steering committee are their own people. The only person who I know of who's in this steering committee, apart for those who belong to this agency, is Professor Meshulam, who is actually the cover, the scientific cover for whatever they decide upon. They have interministerial committee because, as you know, everybody is afraid that cannabis is going to be used by the bad guys, as we heard before, and that's why the police is in there. And since the cannabis nowadays is considered as the green gold for the future, the Commerce Ministry is there, and the Agricultural Ministry is there, and everybody puts a hand in this process of making cannabis available to the very poor people who need it. And there's a committee of indications. In Israel, there must be an indication to get cannabis. As we heard previously, your person from the TGA was speaking about there has to be a good reason to get a license. This is the good reason, the indication. Now, there were indications. The indications are changing all the time. And this committee of indication is assembled according to the agency. The agency is assembling this committee of indications. And for instance, autism that Dedi Meiri was speaking about about an hour ago or 1.5 hours ago, that is the disease in which it's more helped by the cannabis is not in the indication. There's only one doctor who's allowed to prescribe cannabis. It's not prescribe, ask for a license for his patients for autism. There are many children with autism and young adults with autism that cannot get cannabis and can just kneel for cannabis and will not get it because it's not in the indications. Now, the Committee of Indications is supposed to gather every 3 months. It is not. For the last year, it wasn't gathered whatsoever. Now, there's a research and development committee, which is, there's a secret who is getting the, there's a list of researches that are done, and you can see the researches that are done in the USA. There's a list, you can look at it, but in Israel you cannot see which research is done nowadays with cannabis. Okay, this is the main thing that is, kind of the way of thinking of the Israeli government and the Israeli agency. Cannabis is an illegal and forbidden drug and not a medicine. Therefore, there are no prescriptions. One has to have a special license, sorry for this mistake, in order to obtain it. So it's just the same, like all over the world, it is supposed to be, it is considered as a dangerous, forbidden drug. And wherever a patient comes to me and says, okay, I've been to this and this and this doctor, and I'm in a terrible agony, and I said to him, cannabis is an illegal, dangerous, and forbidden drug, and from here on, we are going. Now, the regular track is that the patient comes to me, and I have to ask for application. It's license application, and I apply to the Ministry of Health, and the Ministry of Health send my application to a group of doctors who are the ones who can, they are the decision makers. They called in Hebrew, hamachlitim. They are the decision makers. They don't see the patients. They haven't heard the patients. They don't, sometimes once you see a patient, once you see the patient with the eyes, you can understand that this patient cannot go without the medicine. When you see somebody in a wheelchair, when you see somebody limping, when you see somebody who's like 40 kilos, whereas he's supposed to be 80, you see that there's nothing that you can help him other than give him some aid. But those people, they don't see the patient. They are relying on my report and whatever reports of other doctors that are sent to them. And on the way, there are a lot of things just missing. They were left somewhere else. They have the office that of these people who are the decision makers is far away. It's not far away in your yard scales because you are a big country. It's not as far as Canberra, but it's Jerusalem. And the distance between Tel Aviv and Jerusalem is like 45 minutes drive, but still it's like crossing the Atlantic Ocean or even more the Pacific Ocean, because it's sometimes impossible to cross. And now the decision makers can say yes or no, and once they say yes, it's okay, it goes to the grower. The grower is the one who offers his crops to the patient, and he is the one who gives them the advice what to use and how to use. This is, you would say, inappropriate, but I would say the growers usually know very well what they are growing, and they are the ones who have the most, the experience. They were the ones who were at the beginning, the ones who used it, and they are the ones who know what they are growing. The thing is that we as doctors try to know what is there in the cannabis. And apparently, we don't know. As Daddy Meiri has described it very well, we don't know. The patients, they are the ones who use it, and they know this works for me, and that doesn't work for me. And actually, what is supposed to happen, and is not happening because there's no possibility for it to happen, is that the patient should try as many strains that as he could or as he can to find out which is the one which helps him. And apparently, since it's a plant and it's changing over the time of the year, it changes over the time anyhow, because it's very, very difficult to reproduce the same strain again over and over again. Like Daddy Meiri told you about those patients with autism who all of a sudden became very, very aggressive. Since it's very difficult to trace the same strain, many times the patient has to go from one strain to the other in order to find something which is similar to the one that they used before. So actually, this method of going to the grower and taking the medicine or the treatment that is the most suitable is a good idea. But of course, it's not. It's very, very difficult to trace this, and it's very difficult to regulate this. And this is a thing that the Ministry of Health in Israel is very much concerned about, because they cannot put their footstep on this thing. So this is something that is going to be changed. I'll tell you about it next. Now, if this is okay, if the patient gets the permission and get the licenses and it goes on, it comes back to me, tells me how it works for him, and I give him whatever my advice is how to go on. It can taper off other medications. Usually they are on opioids, they are on anti-epileptics, they are depressive, and all kinds of other medications, and I help him to go down with all those other medications. Sometimes no. Sometimes with the other medications he's in a bad situation, and once he gets the cannabis, it adds to the medications, and then with all this conglomerate of treatment, is getting well. So then I would say, don't taper off the other medications, because you will not be able to live your well-being life. That's what I'm driving the patients to. And if it doesn't get approved, the patient doesn't get approved, then I apply there's a special committee for reapplying, and I usually reapply, and I have patients whom I applied 3 times, and at the end, somehow through a parliament member or some special application, the patient got the medication, because I never give up. I never give up because I think that the ultimate treatment for pain, or even for other chronic diseases, is cannabis. No, it doesn't go. Okay. At the previous time, like for instance in Canada, these were the indications. You see, there's nausea and vomiting, wasting syndrome, multiple sclerosis, epilepsy, pain, cancer, and other pain categories whatsoever. Other movement disorders, dystonia, Huntington, Parkinson's, Tourette, glaucoma, bronchial asthma, hypertension, psychiatric disorders, Alzheimer's. Now, the Israelis have changed it. There's, as I say, there are the indications, and the indications are nowadays this: the approved indication. Cancer, only in active treatment. What does it mean? Usually with cancer, many patients get medications that cause peripheral neuropathy. And this neuropathy is not treated anymore. Once the patient has finished the active treatment, once he's out of the oncology department, is just in observation for the next 5 years, 10 years, he's already cured, but with the whatever he has as whatever things that has happened during the treatment with the cannabis, with the cancer, he has to go on with it without any other aid of the oncologist, of course, because the oncologist finished his work, then he's not entitled to get cannabis. Peripheral neuropathy has to go to a pain specialist, if at all, or to a neurologist. If he was amputated, then the orthopedic surgeon is going on, or the rehabilitation doctor is taking over. And he used to get cannabis for a while, and he wouldn't get the cannabis anymore later on. And actually, many of the patients who underwent cancer treatment, they have things things that still bother them. It's usually, as I told you, damage to nerves and other things which cause pain and inconveniences, and many of them cannot, for instance, those who underwent many stomach or abdominal operations, they usually have a lot of problems with the alimentary tract. They usually have many times nausea and subileus and problems with their digestion. So cannabis can be very helpful for them, but nevertheless, they have to apply to another doctor in order to get cannabis, and it's very questionable if they will get the cannabis, they will get the license for cannabis later on. Neuropathic pain, that means only neuropathic pain. I have to persuade the Ministry of Health, the agency, the doctors there, the decision makers, that my patient who has for instance, fibromyalgia, is undergoing neuropathic pain, because they say, well, fibromyalgia, what kind of disease is fibromyalgia? Is it neuropathic? Is there anything like fibromyalgia at all? So there's a big question about what is neuropathic pain. Crohn's and ulcerative colitis, there's a doctor, a famous doctor by the name of Dr. Timna Naftali, who proved that with Crohn's, the cannabis is alleviating or is helping with the inflammatory bowel disease, and you can see it with the colonoscopy. The colonoscopy before and after, it's obvious that cannabis is helping the patients. And otherwise, the patients are in pains, of course. They have terrible digestive problems. Many of them lose a lot of weight, and losing weight and being not able to get good food intake is causing other problems, like problems with the bones, lack of energy, and other things. So with the Crohn's and ulcerative colitis, there's no doubt that cannabis can be helpful, but there are very few doctors in Israel who would prescribe cannabis or ask for a permission to get cannabis for this kind of patients. There's Parkinson's and Tourette. Nowadays, it's within the approved indications, but very few neurologists would give patients with Parkinson's and Tourette's cannabis. I've asked one of the very famous doctors in Israel, why don't you give the patient cannabis? He rather puts an electrode to the brain or give him some other kind of deodopa. It's a dopamine that is given through right through the duodenum through a special machine that drives the cannabis, the dopa through the intestines. This. Oh, you want me to? Okay. So, the only thing I wanted to mention is that on this list, there's no autism. So you can see that actually those patients who get cannabis from Daddy, or are in the list of Daddy Meiri's research, they are not here. They are not approved in Israel. So there's a new layout that is going to take place. It's in a process, and it's going to be carried out at the end of 2017 or beginning of 2018. But we're not sure that this layout is really going to take place. In this layout, there is a special education program for doctors to be the ones to give the license. But actually, the education program is to make these doctors actually officials of the Ministry of Health. They get a special program with a special computer that belongs to the Ministry of Health, and they have to fill a special form which belongs to the Ministry of Health. So everything is ruled or regulated by those people who sit in Jerusalem. And I cannot, for instance, if the patient is not within the limits of whatever the Ministry of Health has decided upon as something which is okay to get cannabis, he will not be able to get cannabis. There will be ping, no, and the program will go down, and the patient will not get cannabis. So the doctors, there were already 69 doctors who underwent this education program, but it's going to take place maybe on the end of 2017, as I told you. But most of the doctors who did this educational program are very reluctant to go on with it, because it's not going to give them any freedom to give the patients cannabis. It's going to actually to put them into strains again. Just to mention that patients nowadays are very suspicious with the pharmaceutical industry. The pharmaceutical industry used to be the industry that was actually helping the doctors. Nowadays, the doctors are helped by the industry, because the industry is the ones that finance all the conventions and all the science. And so actually, in a way, it's influencing everything. So therefore, the patients come very suspicious, and they say, we don't want something which comes from an industry. We want to have the green, the real thing. We don't want to have something which is a medicine. And it's a real problem, because everybody now was speaking about the industry. And everybody speaks about, let's put it in capsules. Let's put it in special devices that monitors whatever the patient is taking. But the patients want to have it the raw material. They want to see the real flower that they are inhaling, or whatever there is. So there's a big debate about it. Now the situation nowadays, that's the situation. The patient sits miserably as the doctors are fighting behind him just to throw over to the other person the hot potato, not to hold it. And the Ministry of Health is really closing the doors as much as they can do, the same as it happens here, but the Israeli patients are a little bit more pushy. So I take a part in an Israeli multi-center registry about the way patients get medical cannabis. I'll just go very briefly through it, and actually the samples that Daddy Meir is getting is from those patients in this registry. And well, that's the process it goes through. I'll just make it. And this is just the numbers from the first months of this registry. This registry started about one and a half year ago, and the numbers are just from the first months. Nowadays, it's many more patients, and you can see that it's not easy to get the license. During the first months, only part of the patients got approved. The others were declined, like 25% were declined, whereas there are others waiting, and they are waiting for response, or just didn't submit the form. So, just a minute, I wanted to show you. There's the range of the answer of let's say the approval is up to 3 years, 938 days. So there were patients who were waiting 3 years till they were approved to get the cannabis. That's the outcome measures for the first month, and there are things that might be questionable, like the disability. You could see the disability is going down, so people are getting better. Catastrophizing is getting better. All these abbreviations are validated questionnaires. Sleep qualities, so going down means the sleep quality is better. The sleep is one of the first thing that are changing once one gets cannabis. Sleep gets much better. Anxiety goes down, as you see. Depression is going down, and quality of life is another thing that is the opposite. Quality of life is getting better, though the number is going down. And that's what my patient tell me. Pains disappears or wears off. Sometimes, if the pain persists, then it can be put aside. Like my the previous speaker told us, one can concentrate on whatever is going on in his life, not concentrate on the pain, can have this thing, this special thing, this precious thing, which is called well-being. This is, the pain is put aside. The periodic pain is less frequent, the text becomes shorter, sleep is uninterrupted and refreshing, and the appetite is going up. Now, thank you for listening.